Now, some people would say, well, this is the Tigris and the Euphrates, but it doesn't connect to here, so we have a problem. Okay, so now let's look at it. Here is a map of the Tigris and the Euphrates with the modern day map. And it would have to connect right here, but it does not appear so. So let's look at another map of Syria where this would have to connect. Now, this right here, let me do it. This right here, where my cursor's at, this would be the Euphrates. I do believe this right here would be the Tigris, right? Yep, that should be right. And yep, so the Tigris is going to be a little bit north of the Euphrates right here. So let's go back to Syria. So, but the thing is, the Tigris is linked to the Euphrates. So in a way, you only really need to connect the Euphrates to this Mediterranean, which would have been, the Great River, which the other rivers would have came from. And then if you connect the Euphrates by, linkage, you would connect the Tigris as well, right? So, when you look at a river system, they often are in very low-lying areas, and they often, come from mountains, right? Now, when we look at this map, the low-lying areas are going to be the green ones to the, kind of bluish ones. These are going to be the low-lying areas. Now, this is the Euphrates River right here. It's highlighted. For it to connect to the Mediterranean, maybe at one point, thousands of years ago, before the flood, it would have been through here, and then maybe up through here. That's one possible way. Another possible way, rivers can also be at the kind of foot of mountains, and so maybe you go from here and you kind of come more or less along this red line, this border of Syria right here, to, again, this low elevation point right here, to this, kind of lake right here, and then to the Mediterranean that way, okay? And the Mediterranean, more or less, would be the great river that watered Eden, okay? That's what I'm thinking. So, I think, somehow, some way, the Tigris and Euphrates, or maybe just the Euphrates, or maybe both, they at one point connected with the Mediterranean. And that's the best I pretty much got. But when you look at the elevation maps, it makes sense, because it would be in a low elevation area. Okay, and you have this place like right here, Aleppo. Maybe there was a river going through it at one point, and so that's why they always had a city here, because you want to build your cities by rivers or by lakes or by the ocean. And so maybe at one point there was a river going through Aleppo, and maybe it was the Tigris or Euphrates. You have all of these low elevation areas around here, and then, right here, which connect to the Mediterranean. And, again, through either this way, this way, or maybe this way, the Euphrates would have connected, and then maybe the Tigris connected some other way, or maybe the Tigris was just connected via the Euphrates, and with the Euphrates connecting to the Tigris and feeding it, basically. That's how it would have been done. So, maybe it just would have been like a connection right here, and then, coming through right there, or right here, and then coming through right there. However it would have worked, that's how it would have been done. But anyway, at any rate, what's your basically, you know, what's the river that proceeded out of Eden? Okay. And a river proceeds out of Eden to water the garden. So, I mean, that maybe gets into an issue of whether or not Eden is separate from the garden, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, you know, it almost makes you think it is. You know, I'm not totally sure on that part. You know, we go back. So we go back and we see this right here. I think this is the river. And if, if basically, maybe we assume this right here, is Eden. So basically, what would be northern Egypt to Libya, maybe that's Eden. The garden east of Eden, maybe it's somewhere in Israel. And that's basically where I'm coming to the conclusion of. So basically, the Great River, in my opinion, is probably going to be this right here, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the garden should be probably either Israel, modern Israel, or maybe the land of Goshen. But again, if it's separate, then Eden would just be like northern Egypt and Libya, basically Africa, and the garden would basically be Israel. And if it's all the same thing, then, it's all going to be right here. But basically, this is where the action is. And you think about it, this is the land that God promised his people. There seems to be so much of an emphasis on Israel. And why is it? Well, maybe it's because that's where the garden was, okay? And maybe because that's where the garden was, that's why there's so much of an emphasis on it. And so, if it's separate, it's all right here. If it's, not, if it's separate, maybe the garden is Israel and Eden is Africa, basically. And, if it's not separate, maybe the garden and Eden is just Israel. But whatever the case may be, this is it, okay? What we know is Israel, I think that is the garden where Adam and Eve were placed. I do believe, okay? And then you look at, the biblical story, when Jacob was taking his 12 sons and, all their folk into Egypt, they took them into northern Egypt, which is the land of Goshen. Now, maybe Goshen is basically Eden. Perhaps not the garden, but perhaps it's basically Eden. And so maybe when you had that Exodus story of them leaving, the land of Goshen for Israel, that's basically like the Garden of Eden basically like Eden for the garden? I don't know. But basically anywhere from northern Africa to Israel is more or less where I suspect the garden and or Eden to be. Whether or not that's separate or the same thing, I don't, not totally sure. If it's separate, then I guess Eden would be northern Africa and the garden would be Israel. But I basically think that's what's going on here. And, another thing, this is kind of separate. Basically, so, after the flood, the world still would have looked like this for a while, and then it would have been separated. So what was going on there? I think basically what was going on was God wanted people to spread out a little bit, into this landmass, and then after they spread out a little bit, he separated the land masses, basically separating people. And that was a way where you could have people spread out over many of the continents of the earth in a very short time period. That's only a few thousand or a few hundred years, rather than like the tens of thousands that is told to you by Darwinists. Now, I remember hearing a theory a while back, a couple years ago, about the first Americans basically being people who came from like France and Spain into America, into the eastern US, through like some, what they were calling some Ice Age bridge, right? And basically they were trying to say that there was some Ice Age bridge that spanned the entire Atlantic. And I threw it out because it was just garbage. How can you believe that? It's, the suspension of disbelief. It's just too much. But now it makes sense. And I'm not just making this up, right? You type in Ice Age bridge, Spain to America, and there are theories on this, okay? Was North America peopled by Solutreans who crossed an ice, basically an ice bridge? And it's widely believed that the first migrants to North America arrived approximately 14,000 years ago. Ignore that. Having trekked across a land bridge spanning and that would be Atlantic, and basically yada 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 yada, that the Solutrean people from what is now France and Spain may have taken across the Atlantic Ocean some 20,000 years ago over an ice bridge. Okay? So now, and that's not a biblical website. That's a Canadian website, an official Canadian website. And now we go to the, here. New Scientist. Again, not a biblical website. First Americans. Were they Iberian, not Siberian? The first people to settle America may have came from Europe across the Arctic ice rather than a land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. Okay? And again, you have all of this stuff coming out about people coming from southern Europe to the eastern coast of America. It doesn't seem to make sense on a regular map. It's too far across an ocean. But now we type in, we put Iberians here, and you get even more stuff on it. And then you get, there's actually an official term for it called the Solutrean hypothesis. The Solutrean hypothesis about the settlement of the Americas claim that people from Europe may have been among the earliest settlers of the Americas. Now, that doesn't make sense happening 20,000 years ago. There was some ice age and there was enough ice to cross an ocean. Doesn't make sense, okay? It doesn't. But on, let's go back. Now, on this map, it makes sense. On this map, you can clearly see how people from France and Spain would go across into the eastern United States. They would just walk across. That's all they would do. There would be no ice age creating a span of ice that was like thousands of miles wide. There's none of that garbage, okay? They would just walk across. And then when the lands would separate, the people who walked across would separate and they would spread throughout North America, Central America, Southern America, etc., over time. But that's how they would do it, okay? That hypothesis now makes sense with this map, this Pangea map existing a few thousand years ago and not like 500 million years ago. It now makes sense. So I think that's another thing that would have happened. So, yeah, basically, that's the video. When it talks about, when it talks about in 10, a river proceeds out of Eden to water the garden and divides itself into 4 heads. I basically think when you look at this map, all of that really seems to make sense. Maybe this is the Eden. This is the river that proceeds out of Eden, maybe. This is the garden. These are the 4 heads. This is the Nile. This is the, previously, people had a hard time guessing it. The Pishon and the Tigris and Euphrates would have, thousands of years ago connected to this right here. And this is probably where Adam and Eve were started. And, it would make sense because, the Father God really seems to focus on giving his chosen people this land right here. Why? Well, maybe that's where it all started. So, I hope you like this video. It's just a thought I've been having for, honestly a while now. I'm pretty late on making this video, but, I'm making it now. I hope you liked it. And, if you really liked it, check out some of my other videos. I've got a lot of, interesting ideas on my channel. I think you'd probably, probably be good to check them out. And with that, I'm out. Peace and blessings. Stay in Christ. We're in the last days. You need Christ more than ever. Whether you know him as Christ or Yahusha, you need the Messiah more than ever. We're in the last days. I hope everyone, every real human who sees this can make it. And yeah, that's it, guys, for right now. I've got some other videos on deck. I hope you subscribe. Hope you check out some of my other stuff. It's, it's probably even more important than this video right here. So if you think this video was important, I really hope you check out some of my other stuff because it's really important. But yeah, I hope you guys like this, and peace. I'm out. Peace and blessings.